It's time for our grand finale, the CDO panel discussion. I'm going to hand the controls over to Susan Cook, Zaloni CEO, who will be moderating the panel. Welcome, Susan.
Hello, and thank you so very much. Welcome to the finale of what has been an amazing day. I am so excited about the speakers that we had today. So to all of the speakers that have already gone, you were amazing. I mean, the content today was like, it just warmed a true data geek's heart. It was such good content. So that was awesome. Okay, to the finale. So those of you who know me well know that one of my passions is diversity and inclusion in technology. And we need to do a better job in data. So you noticed today that we even had a majority of male speakers. So we're ending strong with a panel of all women. And I'm telling you, these women are powerhouses. So all of them happen to be role models and heroes of mine. So let me introduce our panel. So Gail, I'll start with you. So Gail Evans of Mercer, I have known for more than 5 years. She's been a customer of mine at multiple companies. And even before terms like data governance, data fabric were cool and in vogue, Gail had this vision at Mercer and the larger Marsh McLennan family of companies to use data as a transformational asset. So Gail, why don't you say a few words about yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
I mean, with that intro, I don't know if I have anything more to say. Other than I am absolutely a technology data geek right alongside you. And I've been in technology for over 20 years, and I love how it transforms businesses, people, workforce, and I am fascinated by all the value that it can deliver. And to your question or earlier, I've been at the top 20 companies, HP, Bank of America, Microsoft, and it's all the same. Business technology sometimes is the business.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We're honored to have you. Secondly, Jody is the Chief Data Officer of Kpmg. I've also known Jody for a couple of companies now. And Jody came in relatively recently and built the organization pretty much from scratch, whole new strategy around data, and has done it, in my opinion, amazingly quickly and effectively. So Jody, why don't you say a few words?
Great. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for those compliments. It's a lot of work, a lot of slogging is what I like to say. So different than Gail, I'm not a technologist by background. I'm actually an accountant and finance person. So most of my career was in finance and accounting. What I learned about 7 years ago is my entire career in finance and accounting was really all about data, and I just didn't know it. And so when the opportunity came along to move over into a data role at my former employer, I had to do some thinking about that. I was like, no, it's been about all the data all the time. Everything from, what goes into our financial statements to driving insights for the business I was supporting at the time, to, answering questions during a credit crisis about what was going on in the portfolio. So I've been at Kpmg for about 2.5 years. And again, we started with a data warehouse and a small group of really passionate data geeks. And we've grown pretty quickly since then. And now we have what we call our data supply chain. We've got all the foundational pieces in place. Zaloni is one of those pieces. But it's data warehouse, it's a data lake, it's master data management, it's governance, it's literacy, it's the whole shebang. And so we have a good problem and a bad problem in that we have a lot of people that want to work with us, and the demand is great. So that's the good side of the story. The bad side is we obviously can't do everything for everybody every day of the week. So how do you prioritize and keep people interested while you sort of have them in line waiting for us? So, but thank you. Happy to be here today.
Makes perfect sense. And I too am a finance and accounting person that's into data by accident because they are so interrelated. Okay, my other guest, I'm just honored to have, who is kind of an institution in data and analytics. If you don't know Cindi, you don't know data. Founded the BI Network, Gartner analyst, and now a chief strategy officer at ThoughtSpot. And no, Cindi's title is not chief data officer, but yet she knows more about this role and coaches just about every CDO that I know. So welcome, Cindi.
Thank you, Susan. And Susan and I are mutual fan clubs. I think when you've worked in this industry for so long, I started as a Novell network engineer and then worked on the world's first global data warehouse at Dow Chemical in the 90s. So a long time in this space, feel so privileged to work at ThoughtSpot with some of the best brands in the industry. And you heard Gail and Jody talk about you can't do everything at once. And sometimes it's the technology, sometimes it's the data literacy. So where do you start? Where do you place your bets? And everyone said they're data geeks. And I do wonder, am I a data geek or am I a business geek that knows that data is part of every business?
Oh, that's a nice sort of twist on that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'll take it. We're all business geeks. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get started to the content, because this is about where CDOs are putting their priorities and their investments. So Jody, I'm going to start with you because you had to start. So imagine, or in your case, in reality, you're a new CDO. So what will be the order of the priorities? Where will you focus first to show impact as fast as possible?
Yeah, so that's a really great question because it is a challenge and it's a fine art. There's no science to it. So when I came on board at Kpmg, we did have a data warehouse, lots of people using that. So there was a pipeline of work around that. But we recognized we needed to get a number of the other foundational pieces in place, the technology as well as the people and the process around it. So based on, looking around at what were some of the things that were going on, I did make some bets. A bunch of work had been done to actually define what is KPMG's data strategy, why does it matter, what value will we get from it? And so leveraging that, there were a few things that I recognized early on that we needed to get going on. So one is a metadata catalog. How do people know what our data means? So it's simple that, and so we have that up and running. We are continuing to add content to it, but now we can actually say, no, look, this is how you go find out what data we have, what it means, how it's calculated, how you get access to it, et cetera. So that was a lot of work, but as a way to start showing something to the business versus going dark for a long period of time. A big sort of capability that I made a decision on that we needed to go against pretty early on was master data management. So a lot in the strategy was around the challenges we were having around, having too many sources of truth about certain types of data. So from my prior employer, I knew the importance of that, but I also knew the complexity with getting going with that. And so we prioritized that early. We did not have a live use case on day one for it. Turns out that use case showed up because we're implementing a new CRM system. And so that master data management solution is really, really important to that. So then the other thing that we started early on was the data lake part of this. Again, tons of data everywhere. How do you start bringing data together? And we actually started on-prem because we have certain requirements based on what data we're talking about where it does need to be on-prem currently. But we did move very quickly to our cloud-based data lake. So again, there was a little bit of, placing some bets on, what was the business going to need? And so now we do have a number of use cases lined up around, okay, we need you to help us ingest data, engineer data, and make data, curate the data for a variety of use cases. And we're using the data lake capability, again, people, process, and technology across a number of major programs and other initiatives that are going on right now. Does not mean we're done, but I feel like we've got a really strong foundation in place.
Great. Gail, I'm coming to you because you actually had a role of chief data officer, but have since been elevated and promoted to more of a chief digital officer across companies. So Gail, when you started in both of those roles, where did you focus first?
I think culture was one I needed to address initially, right? Because the value is how the business sees the value, how they would like to look at data and start to think about new revenue streams or new ways to drive efficiency in the back office or within their line of business. And so the first step was around really to Cindy's point around digital literacy and culture. What is it to be data driven? What does that mean? What does that even mean? And at the same time, right, because we're agile and we learn how to multitask and kick off several trains that leave the track, we also started to introduce this notion of a knowledge fabric, and it was on-prem. Storing data, eliminating the silos, identifying the data model. But it started with use cases with the business because they needed to make an investment. So we had to see immediate value, and we started with data acquisition. That was, guess what? You don't need to send an Excel spreadsheet anymore. We can really acquire that data and store it in a database. And so there was opportunities for us to identify quick wins with simple data capabilities that did not boil the ocean, but had believers, along the way, believers. So it became more of a pull, a push as opposed to a pull in the journey. So we built out the foundation. We took a look at the cultural changes, introduced digital literacy on-prem. We started on-prem, and now we have Knowledge Fabric 2.0, data management, data catalog. But I think the most important piece for us was the use cases and kicking off a test and learn, being able to make it okay to fail while building out a platform that will be future-proof.
Well said. Well said. All right, Cindi, a ton of chief data officers come to you for coaching and advice. When you're telling them how to get started and show impact soon in their journey, what do you advise them?
Yeah, well, I think both Jody and Gail hit on why this role is so hard. And I liked Gail's point about quick wins. But even those quick wins, look how many slices there are to get to the quick win. There's culture, there's modernizing the technology, and you can't be data driven if you don't have good data. So I think of these 6 streams that you have to work on in parallel. But as a new CDO, you do have to show that quick win to, as Doug Laney talked about this earlier as you kicked off, really show the art of the possible and keep people excited and engaged. Because to go back and work on some of the really hard things, and if you slip into boiling the ocean, you're going to lose that support that requires the people change management and the culture change. So quick win, rinse, repeat, and then just keep evolving.
Great advice. Great advice. Okay. All 3 of you have mentioned that word culture, all of you. And it is certainly a data culture doesn't come automatically or easily. So what are some actions or investments that you have taken to drive that culture? Cindi, I'm going to start with you. Where do you see CDOs actually investing or taking action around building a data-driven culture?
Yeah, and I do want to point out that culture has only increased in importance. In fact, from a global survey that we do, 61% of chief data officers or digital transformation officers say culture is the reason why they have not been able to execute on their plans. And it is, do you value data, but do you trust it? And is data used to punish or to learn and reward? We have a lot of vanity metrics. So manipulating data so that everything just looks good, those are bad things. So celebrating those decisions and the increase in data literacy or data fluency, doing things like badging, I think is a great tactic, but it's also rewarding the good behaviors. And then also a culture of innovation and experimentation. So fail fast, don't get into the analysis paralysis.
Great advice. Jody, how about you? What were some of the first things you did about culture?
So I think obviously we talk about it a lot. So when I would go out and I joined the firm and I was doing my road shows, I always talked about, people, and that's the importance of it. We can build all the whiz bang technology on the face of the earth, but that doesn't change the way, an employee does their job or thinks about how they can use data to do their job. So, every time I talk about that, and I've been very consistent with that in my messaging. I think one of the other things that we've done, and we've done it at Kpmg as well as my former employer, is find who your early adopters and advocates are. So you can get some of those quick wins that Gail was talking about, and then that gives you some data stories. So I was actually talking to somebody yesterday about this at one of my colleagues overseas in Kpmg, and they're like, well, how do you get people there? And I go, well, there's a little bit of fear of missing out. So when you start talking about so use the FOMO part of this, is that, once you get going and you start telling some data stories, you're like, well, wait a minute, all the cool kids are over there and I've got an idea too. So how do I actually get involved? And that has actually, so I think one of the things when you start talking about culture, I think of it, culture, communication, and change management. So that communication piece is really important. So how do you find those data stories and make them resonate with the business? So one of the things we do with my Kpmg team is we have a monthly newsletter. And we look for data stories where we can talk about, okay, we just worked with finance and accounting, or we just worked with so-and-so, and here's something we did. And what we really want to focus on is what's the punchline? How did we help somebody get to an insight and outcome, a different way of doing their job? And so it can maybe start, moving some creative juices with some of the other folks to create that interest and momentum. And then that's a lot of work, to be honest with you. Finding the data stories, communicating and making them resonate is actually really hard work. Sometimes it's easier to ingest data into a data lake and engineer it versus doing some of this other stuff, but it's super important, right, to get that momentum around this.
I know this is sounding crazy coming from a software vendor, but data ops is people, process, technology, right. And culture is all of those. And you, Jody, I think I'll paraphrase, you have to sell and market all the time to build a data-driven culture.
That's
Gail,
right.
Same question to you. What were some of those first things you did to build the culture?
I mean, you said it, right? You have to sell and market this journey. Always. It is. Sometimes I would think I was a marketer, right? Because you have to have a value proposition for your audience to make them believe it. So what is that value proposition?
Right.
How do you engage your communications team to start a message map, really, literally, a message map to the audiences that you serve? But you also want to spotlight. We used to have demo days where you spotlight what you have achieved to sort of ignite the next experiment, the next data use case that they would like to get involved in. But I think also using the digital media, videos, a way in which teams could come together virtually. This was before the pandemic, so now everyone's on Zoom, so that's an easy thing, right? But really becoming a marketer. But the one last thing I'll say about culture is, in order for us to get believers around data, they do need to have a reason. Why, answering the why question. My business is fine. We're growing at 5-10%. We're doing good. So why do you believe we should invest in in data, and what does it bring me? So in order to change the culture, I believe you have to answer the why question, and to help them become believers.
Great.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Of course.
Go right ahead.
Well, I love these great minds together, because it is the why, and I often say the why, and you do have to communicate, market, brand it. The why should tie to the company strategy,
Right.
but then it's also why for my day-to-day job. If you're not going to make my day-to-day job better, that company mission might be a little more elusive. And then, Gail, I loved your point about using different media, because one of our customers, they actually create TikTok videos and use those internally. Well, hey, this is the way you want to talk to millennials, right?
We forget we are all consumers, right? We all use TikTok, Instagram. Well, maybe, I don't know if I use TikTok, but we use these different medias. And I think that we do need to bring them internally into our organizations, into our company, because the millennials are, I'm at a life stage where I know that my team is going to be made up of a lot of millennials. So we do need to talk to them differently and attract their buy-in and attention differently as well. So I totally agree with you, Cindi.
In terms of driving culture, I'll be a panelist for a moment. This is Zaloni is my first CEO job, and I've been in the job just shy of 2 years. And when I came into this company, we weren't, even though we're in the data business, we were like the cobbler's children. We really weren't using a lot of data to manage the business. So in our positions of visibility and power, not that I would ever, promote all culture needs to be driven by the top down, but you can have a pretty big influence on driving culture top down when you say, oh, you want to hire, 3 more support engineers. Well, show me the data. Are we not hitting our SLAs? Do we really need that? Oh, I want to hire another sales rep. Well, show me that everybody is at full capacity. All of the justifications, it's the right thing to do. Oh, we need to do this. Really? Show me, prove to me through data that we need to do this. So there is an amazing amount of influence that just in our leadership positions, we can imbue in the culture just by asking questions that way.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we talked about culture. Let's talk about people. So one of the biggest challenges I think that CDOs have is sometimes they are the herder of cats, or they are the influencer without necessarily the ownership of people. But what have you seen and done organizationally? So Jody, let me start with you. What are like those first things you did in terms of hiring or organizational changes, people?
Yeah. So people is another really hard part of what we do here. And one, it's getting the right talent. And right now it's very, very competitive in the market. But, I've spent a lot of time thinking through how do we organize what we do? So we have, right sort of accountability, depth, scope, et cetera. But also thinking through, how do I create opportunities? How do I understand what my bench is? And so, those are the people that work directly for me. But then I need to have people that work, within my team that can go out and have conversations with those that don't work directly for us. So again, my team's centralized, we're at the center of a federated model. And we need to work with, folks across our 3 businesses and our back office. So in my leadership team, I need people that can talk the business with all of those folks. to help. Again, it's, there's a carrot and a stick. Some cases I do have a stick, other cases I'm trying to get people to come along with us. So I need my leadership team to be able to talk about the strategy, to talk about the why, to talk about the outcomes, and be able to, again, bring people along with us and say, oh my gosh, I hear you're working on this really cool thing, Susan. Can we talk about how maybe my team can help you? And so I found some opportunities where I've been able to insert my team in a couple of different things, and my leadership team have come, hey, I just found out so-and-so's doing this. We'll go talk to them. Let's figure out how we can get involved and engaged so we can get more folks, more advocates around the firm, as well as deliver real results and outcomes for the business. But, having the right group of people that can talk the data story and the value of the data story, the why, is really, really important. And that's something we all have to be able to tell the story, and we're working on it.
The topic of this session is investments. Where are CDOs investing? And I think the first answer is always in people, the skills. Gail, same question to you in terms of people and organization. What were the first things you did?
Hired some very strong data people who had also business acumen, right? And that could speak the language of the business while teaching them the data story, right? Because we needed to be where the business was or is, and then bring with us the conversation about the value of data to your business, to your clients, to your customer. And so the first investments was to build out that team that knew about data management, data governance, but through the lens of the business. It's very difficult to, in some cases, to find us data geeks that have a business lens. And so we lose the business customer, client, because we want to speak technology.
Gail, let me follow up on that. So those are hard people to find. And if you do find them, they're usually really expensive. So if you have to poach from one or the other and then teach, do you poach from data deep technologists and try to teach the business? Or do you poach from business, finance, or operations and then teach data technology? Or do you just go where you find the best and grab them and do whatever's necessary?
That's funny because I am in the middle of this conversation.
You're trying to steal one.
No, not trying to steal someone, trying to, I believe that I would start with a strong business sense in terms of data use cases and stories and value propositions with a technology, strong technology understanding on how we can use technology to drive value. Now, that's for some roles, right? There's always a caveat, right? That some roles that business first, technology core is critical. And those are the ones that I believe are client facing or business facing roles. Because the way I've structured the team, I call them the people in the green box. They make the money, right? And those people in the green box, they need a strong business, then technology understanding. And then there's core enablers. These are the tech folks that you start with business, but they have an appreciation. Start with the technology, but they have appreciation of the business.
Makes sense.
I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. Cindi, what are you seeing? Where are CDOs investing first in hiring and organization and people?
Yeah, so interestingly, this was a topic of one of the recent Data Chief podcasts that I host with the Chief Analytics Officer at Estee Lauder. And I do think the CDO role is so hard. And you look at the maturing of the role when it started with just protect my data, get it all clean and in one place. And now it's really that offensive role of how do I create value with this? And this requires so much more collaboration, but also shifting maybe from being a lot of the team, an order taker, to really, Gail, you used the word enabler. And Jody, you talked about, asking the right questions, getting engaged. Why are you trying to do this? Or understanding what the business is trying to accomplish. So one of the top strategy calls that I do is, how do I organize the team? How do I create the right incentives? So I'm going to recolor code my boxes. The business people all make green. I don't know what color I should make the data people. And then the hardcore IT cloud infrastructure, maybe a different color, but it is a top concern. We know from research, the federated model is more impactful, but the culture has to be there, because if you do have political tensions, a federated model really risks becoming siloed and so much duplication of effort.
Okay, audience, I'm warning you now, go ahead and submit your questions to the Q&A chat. So we've got some questions queued up, but let me ask this. What was the toughest thing that you faced, and how did you overcome it? And Jody, I'm going to come back to you, because you mentioned something that I hear all the time. There's no shortage of work to do. There is no shortage of stuff that needs to be done. Figuring out where to start, where to put scarce resources in terms of money and people and talent. Like, where do you, like, what's that thought process to prioritize? Yeah. So I'll turn it over to you.
And that's interesting that you asked that question. Last week, I presented my fiscal 22 business plan to my boss and my peers. And I have 5 big programs that we're working on. And my boss goes, well, which one's number one? And I go, well, it depends who has the most in my email right now. Because it does change. This one could be it, because this person's like, I need this, and this one over here. And so there's a little bit of whack-a-mole, but absolutely, we've got to figure out how to prioritize. And every data opportunity, they all sound amazing and wonderful, but you got to take a step back and say, okay, which ones are going to deliver, the outcomes we're looking for? Which one are going to be most impactful to the business? Which are the quick wins, which Gail, you talked about. You need to have that right mix of quick wins as well as some longer term projects that are really, really transformational. And it's something that I think about all the time. So our fiscal year starts October 1st. So we're in the heights of our annual planning. And this is something that my leadership team and I are going through. What is all the demand? And where do we start? And I was in a meeting yesterday where the person I was meeting with goes, I'm your number one, right, Jody? I go, yeah, certainly you are. But what's that mean to the team? And then, how do we make sure we're appropriately staffed? And so that's the other thing is, again, the war for talent right now is just crazy. And how do we make sure we have the right people that have that right mix of the business acumen as well as the technology? And I can't have all of one. I need to have the right mix. So it comes down to prioritization. And if we can get through that prioritization, which is not always pretty, then what skills do I need and what levers can I pull from a resourcing perspective? And so, one of the things, we have a big program we're working on right now where we do need some more folks. And so what the team hears me say is we're casting the net wide for those folks. Traditional recruiting for, employees, contractors, onshore, offshore, temp to perm. Leverage your networks, look at different markets that we haven't looked at before for talent, et cetera. So this is a constant stream of conversation that we're having around how to, and we can't do it all. And that's the other thing is then we also have to manage expectations. So a conversation I will have with my boss shortly after Labor Day is, okay, if this is my budget, this is what we can do. And this is what my team and I are prioritizing that we think is the most important, the most impactful. And this is what falls below the line. How do you feel about what falls below? So I want to give him some options and some trade-offs there, right? Because I do need that feedback. And the other thing we do is we take our business plan to our data council to be very transparent with them. And the data council has representation from the 3 businesses as well as the back office. Have we prioritized the right things? Can you see what yourself in our plan and how we can add value to what you need? So it's not a once and done exercise. It's a continuous exercise of prioritization and evaluating the resources. And yeah, so I don't have a perfect answer, but it's a lot.
But it's a lot, and prioritization is the #1 challenge that I hear from everyone. All right.
Yep.
Bill, what was your biggest obstacle and how did you overcome it?
I think my biggest challenge in the beginning was that I thought this data team, this digital team, could solve Mercer's challenges. And all I needed to do is have the best talent, people, process, and technology, the best talent, the best technology platform, and change the culture. And we did that. We built the knowledge fabric, as you know, and, Mercer OS, mean stack, a lot of great things, but there was still something missing. And I think what was missing is that data, it had to be embedded in the strategy for the business, right? It had to be a pillar. It had to be something the CEO, and I love our CEO. If you haven't met Martine Ferland, she is pretty awesome. But she embedded digital, she embedded data as a part of Mercer's overall strategy. So in her town halls and in her EL executive leadership team, it was seen as a priority. And that was the missing ingredient. Everything else was tough. But when it became a part of the strategy, a part of the growth, seen as, when your CEO asks, where's data? Where's data monetization? Why aren't we monetizing our data? Why aren't we solving our clients' issues through, data intelligence or commercial intelligence? It opens up a whole new world for you. So I think the toughest was to come to that realization that the power is really in getting the executive leadership team and being a part of Mercer's strategy, not on an island, but a part of the fabric of Mercer's strategy. And when we became that, things changed.
That makes great sense. Cindi, what are you hearing from your CDOs? What's the toughest thing they have to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's knowing where they are in their journey. And if I think some of the CDOs, like they will say, if I move ahead with this, I will get fired. I will, hurt somebody's feelings. That's just political suicide or what have you. And I think this is when everyone needs to know when they're fighting a losing battle and move on. There's enough organizations out there that get the value of data and get how hard it is and get how much as your speaker from MongoDB was talking about, how much of the legacy technologies will hold you back. So I think recognizing that is really what's tough for CDOs. And I think about the ones that I coach who have big visions, and when are we dreaming too big? When am I pushing them too hard? Or when are they just spinning their wheels? I think is a challenge. And aligning, this is why we also say for the biggest impact, ideally report to the CEO. It is about using data to transform the business. I think some of these political things write themselves when you have that type of organizational model.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. Okay, people online, go ahead and submit questions in the Q&A chat. And the first one is this. And Gail and Jody, I'll come to you because I'm going to ask you a personal question about your compensation plans. So a lot of people want to know, what are the KPIs of whether or not you're successful? How are you measured? So Jody, I'll start with you.
That's actually a really great question. So obviously we go through our annual, objective setting process. And so, the first year it was very much about hiring the team and getting the foundation in place. Again, people, process, and technology. And the second year was about, okay, now we're open for business. How are we delivering value? So we tried to understand the things that we're working on and why they matter. And so we actually keep metrics on a number of different things. I share those with my boss and our operations committee of our board on a periodic basis. And so, I don't have revenue responsibility, but I support folks that do. So what are the projects that we're working on that actually, help our professionals in audit, advisory, and tax actually drive something for our clients? So we have a number of things we're doing right now where we are working with them to enable them to change the way they do their business. But yeah, no, I sat down with my boss. I have my annual business plan, and how did we do against that? Is one of the really big things. And so right now we put together quarterly roadmaps that show the outcomes of the things we're working on. We connect them back to business strategy, business value, business outcomes, and then we actually also share that with our data council and a number of other folks. So you can say, okay, did we do the things we said we're going to do, or if not, why? And so, yeah, we've got milestones and outcomes. We track them. It's a lot of work too, but it's important. Again, that goes back to data stories. Because we have that discipline, I can find the data stories and I can talk about the things we're doing and why they matter.
Great. Gail, you have data responsibilities, but you also have digital transformation responsibilities. What are your KPIs? How are you measured?
I think what we've done is we track revenue generated from our solutions, right? I'm in partnership with our global product leader, right? And if we deliver our scope and we deliver business value that's connected to revenue. So when my counterpart says we delivered 50 million in revenue, it's a we delivered 50 million in revenue. So we track revenue, we report to our executive leadership team and as well as the board, the revenue generated from the products, the data products and the data capabilities that we've built, right? Because we can build capabilities that is a part, a component in a product and not the entire product. And then there are products that are clearly digital products. And we also, that's the revenue is one metrics, and we also look at the CAGR, right? Just like a business. And the other one is around efficiency. How are we driving, data and digital is driving efficiency for the firm, and how can we measure those savings that can be contributed to the capabilities, the data capabilities and solutions we deliver. So those are the three. I'm trying to push for a shadow P&L, but they're not there yet. But I'd love to be able to do that. But we'll see.
Makes sense. All right, Cindi, what do you hear most frequently from CDOs? What are those KPIs in their comp plans?
Well, I think this is where it depends on the stage and maturity of the CDO. If it's about protecting the data, that's kind of more the defensive side of things. I love the use of the data stories that Jody referred to. The ultimate goal would be, is it revenue contribution, efficiency contribution? And even if you're not selling data as a product, it's that percentage that data can be credited to that. I'll share something. I can actually name the person because they've written about it externally, but Eric Colson, the Chief Algorithms Officer at Stitch Fix, and before that, Netflix. If you look up his HBR article, and I'll tweet it out afterwards, he really talked about how the clearest thing for CDOs is this revenue generation. And what's harder is when you're focusing internally and it's more, have I protected us from a data breach? Or have I improved internal decision-making? That's more the squishy stuff. So it's harder to quantify that, but it's got to be both.
Awesome. Gosh, ladies, I can't believe like an hour has passed already. Like I wanted to sit here and talk to you for the rest of the evening. I wish I could. But unfortunately, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So truly, from all of us at Zaloni, thank you for being here. We are so honored to have this breathe this rarefied air of people like you. So thank you so very much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Susan.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to all of our guests who have hung in there with us for the last 5 hours, oh my gosh, are we so excited that we had you all day with us. And I think it was a terrific day. So for those of you who joined us, thank you, thank you, thank you. We would love to help you reach out to us. We have free trials of our software available on our website. Just, engage with us. We'd love to talk to you. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to our MC, Kelsey, just to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you again to our partners, guest speakers, and audience for joining us today. Be sure to check out Zaloni.com to get the latest in data ops, to try to platform free for 14 days and see their recent release, the SaaS data governance solution for AWS. We also encourage you to complete the post-event survey and give us your feedback. Again, on behalf of Zaloni, our friends and partners, enjoy the rest of your evening.